Hello, and welcome to The Right Side. I'm your host, Shane Patrick Connolly. The Right Side takes a look at issues, opinions, and news from a conservative perspective. With us today, we are privileged to have Rob Long, writer, producer, and founder of Ricochet.com. Welcome to you, Rob.
No, thanks for having me.
Well, let's start by finding out how you got into the business.
Depends on which business you're talking about. I've been in the entertainment business, show business, for my whole career, for about 30 years. I was a film student at UCLA in the master's screenwriting program, and that was a long time ago, probably way before you were born, back, I think it was the McKinley administration. And someone told me, hey, the real opportunities in television. And so I wrote a couple of TV scripts and joined up with a friend of mine, and we sent them out, and before we knew it, we were working. We were staff writers on what was then the biggest TV show ever, called Cheers, which I still have to remind people, it was on, because it used to be, I would say to people, I write for Cheers, and they would say, oh, I love that show. And then a few years would pass, and they'd say, oh, I used to watch that show with my parents. And now it's like, oh, that's my grandparents' favorite show. So I have to, dated. I'm a dated character at this point. But then I started doing that, and I never stopped. I just loved it so much, and I like comedy and like writing it, and liked writing and producing shows. Had a bunch of shows on and a bunch of shows off after that, and still do it and still love it.
So a few people have heard of Cheers, I believe.
Yeah, true. Yeah, thank God.
Yeah. And so is there anything more recent that we would recognize?
Well, I did this Kevin James show for a couple of years that was on CBS, and we did our best. We didn't make it to the finish line, but did two and a half great years. And before that, had a bunch of shows on. Did one with Bob Newhart and Judd Hirsch called George and Leo. Did a couple shows on the WB network, which was the Young Person's Network. And you try. That's the great thing about we're in Silicon Valley right now, so it's sort of like venture capital, right? You try a lot of things, and the goal is to get one hit. And sometimes your career you have one hit, sometimes your career you have 5 hits, sometimes you have no hits. But the point is you're in there swinging.
Well, you've had a very interesting career, and then you started Ricochet.com.
Yeah.
And that's a web-based business, right? What is that like?
Well, Ricochet. I was a co-founder of Ricochet. I started with my friend Peter Robinson, and we started right around the time of the Barack Obama's election. And our theory was that, first of all, the internet's kind of a swamp. It's kind of nasty. And so we needed a place for people on the center right to get together and be able to have a conversation with some strict rules about conduct and civility. And we're conservatives, so we figured that the way to do that is apply a free market solution to that problem, right? Why do people go on Twitter and on the internet and just scream obscenities at each other? It's because it's free, because they don't pay anything for that. So if you join a club, which you join, Ricochet is like $2 a month or something, you get some skin in the game. Like, nobody joins a club to scream obscenities in the clubhouse. You join because you want to have a meaningful interaction with people around the country, around the world for us, from the center-right perspective. So we have a lot of people from the center and a lot of people on the right, a lot of people who love Trump, a lot of people who don't love Trump. And so it becomes a lively, civil, very polite, but very interesting discussion, which I think is the only one of its kind on the web.
So Ricochet is center-right, conservative perspective, right? Well, how did you become a conservative? Hollywood's not exactly known as a incubator for conservatism.
No. I used to make the joke when I started. I started writing in 1990. So I used to make the joke that the good news is, well, the bad news is there aren't that many Hollywood conservatives. The good news is that 1 out of every 3 of them becomes president of the United States, because that's about what it was back then. Well, I'm a generational conservative. Like, there are people my age. I mean, I went to very liberal schools and very liberal university, and basically was pretty liberal.
Right, UCLA, not exactly a bastion of conservatism.
No, and by then I was a graduate student. I mean, I had come from back east, and I was taught, people forget, but I was taught that Reagan was a dangerous lunatic, and he was going to blow up the world, and that we were going to surround ourselves with nuclear weapons, and we were going to be living in a post-nuclear Holocaust world. And if you looked at popular culture back then, if you look at, like, the ABC did some giant 2-part TV movie called The Day After. And if you're old enough, you remember that. If you're young enough, you forget. You don't even know what a TV movie was.
Post-apocalyptic kind of tale.
What happens and how we get to the nuclear Holocaust was because of rabid anti-communism in America and its counterpart in Russia. And I was just taught that was the case. And I was taught all the way up until, one day in 1989 or 88, I was taught that communism and the Soviet Union was just another system. And the people who live under that system are perfectly happy living their lives. And the people who live in our system, we're happy living our lives. And it's kind of gross and maybe even a little bit tacky to like talk about how bad communism is. And then the Berlin Wall came down. And it was all the lies were revealed, right? It wasn't just that they were happy, they were enslaved in East Germany. It wasn't that the people in Russia were happy living under the tyranny of communism. They were happy when it was over. Some of them stood in the middle of the street and were shot and killed for freedom. And it turns out Ronald Reagan was right, and everybody else was wrong. Everybody else who taught me was wrong.
Yeah, so it was quite the opposite of the outcome that they were predicting.
Totally. Right.
We actually backed away from nuclear annihilation.
Right, peace through strength, right? Reagan was right. And so once you discover that, once you think, okay, well, that was wrong, what else is wrong? And then you start reading, I read Paul Johnson's Modern Times, and you read, the greats. Some of them live around here. You read, not just, Milton Friedman was a fellow here at Hoover. Tom Sowell, fellow here at Hoover. You start reading these books, and you start thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe a lot of things were wrong. And then at that point, you think, well, okay, maybe the way to freedom, and maybe the way you treat people around the world, and the way the posture of your country around the world, and is the same as the posture of your community at home. Maybe the choice that we have in the marketplace is the right choice for schools and for healthcare, and maybe freeing up consumers to make choices is a good thing. Once you do that, it's like now you're down the rabbit hole. You can't come back.
Now, that doesn't seem like the trend currently in California.
No, it doesn't. Right.
But
no.
Then again, we have some big problems. I think from a conservative perspective, we'd say because of it,
right.
these problems aren't getting solved, and they just keep throwing more money at them. Right. What would be something that would be ripe for the application of free market principles today in California?
Well, what's interesting about California is California has the history, had one of the greatest public school systems in the country, in the world. And now ask yourself this question, right? How many people come to California so they can send their kids to public school? Not many, right?
No.
How many people come to California so they can send their kids to public university? Lots.
Yeah.
Why? Public universities, they're funded by the state. They get taxpayer dollars, but we also compete. They compete for students. They have to show results. We totally exempt high schools from having to do that. We actually don't even ask them to do that. Well, why shouldn't we just at least have that level of choice at high school that we have at college? But the sort of monopolistic forces fight that. And, that's something that I think conservatives always forget about. Like, school choice is I think it's a moral issue. We should be talking about it all the time. That's what's going to make the difference between an America that, grows and changes and adapts to the future, and an America that stays behind, gets 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 steps behind. It's education. Around the world, they're getting a better education than we are. That should make us nervous.
Mm-hmm. Now, conservatives often feel they're being attacked, they're under attack, and you just talked about connecting people with people on values. I was listening to a program on Ricochet, Jonah Goldberg.
Yeah, The Remnant.
And yes, and a great show. And he was talking with someone from the American Enterprise Institute about how we connect on values. And is that something that you would be a proponent of? How do we communicate conservative messaging to? Well,
I think we have to decide what we're really trying. What's our outcome here? And in the past, I think conservatives, or I shouldn't say conservatives, I should say the political party that represents most conservatives is the Republican Party. And in the past, what it's done is it's used values and values-based arguments and messages as a wedge to divide people. Like you're either in, you're out. And that's worked that's worked a lot, because when you get right down to it, a lot of people feel they're a little conservative, right? That's working less and less now. And so we have to come up with another way to do it, another goal. And I don't think the goal should be to identify people who are in the in-group or the out-group. Instead, it should be, what do you really care about? If you accept the fact that we're not all going to agree on everything, and that I'm not going to agree on how you live your life, you're not going to agree on how I live my life, there's a whole bunch of things that we do that are really not up for discussion. But what kind of country do we want? We want a country where kids go to school, where every kid can get a good education and learn something about science, right? Because if you don't learn something about science and technology, you're kind of going to be lost. We want a place where if you do have to change your job, or if you do have to go somewhere else, or if you do get sick, that you're not going to die in the street. That's fair. That's a legitimate thing. Those are values. How do you accomplish that? The left says, what we do is we create a gigantic monopolistic corporation, basically, that's union-based, and we say you are now in charge of all education, and if you any criticism of you, you squash, right? And then on healthcare, we say we're going to create this gigantic federal program that's going to set prices and procedures in D.C., and it's all going to have this ripple effect on everything everybody does and what your doctor tells you to do. What conservatives say is, we're going to let you choose. We're going to assume that you're smart. We're going to assume that you, as a parent, care about your kid's education, so you're going to be attentive to it, and you're going to pick the best school for your kid. We assume that you're going to want to stay healthy, so you're going to want to go to the doctor and demand that doctor be open at 8 o'clock at night when you're home, or be open early in the morning before you go to school. What all those things? Like, you're going to demand service, because consumers, empowered consumers demanding service, are incredibly powerful, more powerful than any bureaucrat could ever imagine being, and that's what free market conservatives believe.
So what do you think the iPhone would be without free market principles?
That's what it always freaks me out. You have these people, especially here in Silicon Valley, but even kids, like younger people, they have this iPhone. Look, my phone's in my pocket, right? If I put it here and you touch it, like, I get a little freaked out. Like, put my phone down, right? Like, what are you doing? Not because you're going to see anything on it, but because, like, I have it set the way I like it. When you go to the Apple store, the guy's got your phone, and he's like, don't change the way I like it. We have this obsession with making sure it's all personalized to us, and yet why is it that the whole generation that demands that level of specific personalization from a $1,000 piece of technology, right, wants to get its health care from the post office?
So Elizabeth Warren, Senator Elizabeth Warren, was just talking about breaking up some of these technology companies. Isn't it strange that she hasn't proposed breaking up big government monopolies? Right. Only private, competitive industries, you could say, because Apple's not the only phone producer out there.
Oh, absolutely. Apple has enormous competition. For that matter, so does Google, really, when you get right down to it. I mean, you could come up with a better algorithm if you want. I mean, the fact that these companies had this enormous amount of growth from 0 to whatever they are now is a sign that the barrier to entry is really just how smart you are and how smart your business is, not how you crowd out the competition. I mean, it's as easy to type google.com as it is to type bing.com, right? There's a reason why Google outpaces Bing. Part of me thinks with this stuff is like, this is not the part of me that I'm really proud of, right? This is the part of me that I'm kind of embarrassed about, but sometimes people have this, like, I say to a lot of those companies, well, good, you know what, tough luck. You guys are all left-wing. You all love big government, and this is what you don't get. You can't get half big government. You can't get big government to regulate all sorts of things like fossil fuels and this and that and the other, and tell you where to go to school. And you can't get that and then not have them look at you and say, well, wait a minute. While we're doing all this other regulation over here, we might want to regulate you. And I think there's a lot of people in Silicon Valley now who are suddenly rethinking, they're zipping up their fleece vests and thinking, I wonder if I made a terrible mistake. Instead of being what they should have been all along, which is robust proponents of what got us here, risk capitalism. Like, you don't get, you ask anybody in Silicon Valley, you don't win all the time. You win one, it's like Hollywood. You win 1/10 of the time. But you got to play the game. You have to have, if you're an investor, you have chips on the table, you have skin in the game. And if you're an entrepreneur, You've got to get in there swinging, and that's part of what that's part of what makes America great. I always say that what makes America great isn't how many new people there are on those, the Forbes 400 list or like whatever that is. It's how many people drop off every year.
Yeah, the churn.
The churn that's healthy. That's what you want. New people at the top all the time.
So you've been a conservative in Hollywood for a long time now.
Yeah.
And it developed over a period of time, would you say? And but what about young people coming into your industry?
They're all liberals. They're all Democrats.
And what if there was a conservative? Do they see opportunity there? Are they discriminated against? Or
well, one of my old friends was a very close friend of mine, Andrew Breitbart, who died 10 years ago now. Well, maybe more than that, 15 years ago. No, 10 years ago. I think terrible. He said we would have this argument because he would say yes. There are a lot of people who feel like they haven't gotten jobs in Hollywood because somebody found out they were, conservative. I have never experienced that. I never once experienced that. If anything, I found Hollywood to be kind of an open, interesting, truly embracing diversity community. I mean, compared to any American university, Hollywood is like this, great, free, intellectual, bazaar. He hated that because he would say, well, that was my specific experience and it isn't real. And he would have 10 or 15 other people he could say had the opposite experience. I write comedy. So I think that if you could tell what my politics are from my comedy, I'd be in trouble. Because there's nothing funny about politics. There really isn't. Veep, very funny show on HBO. I don't really, I know they're all liberal, right? But you can't tell from watching that show. But Silicon Valley, one of the funniest shows on TV, is pretty much a parody of what happens here in this valley. And I'm not sure. Every now and then I see it, I think, I think they're conservative. They're economic conservatives anyway. But in general, you don't really, if you want to tell funny stories, they have to be funny, and they have to be stories about people. And normal people don't think about politics that much.
That's interesting. Now, I was watching a reboot of One Day at a Time.
Okay, right.
And I was looking for this kind of thing. Is it biased in some way, in a political way? Because if it was, it probably wouldn't be that funny. And I have to say they did kind of approach it in an even-handed way.
Oh, really? Okay, I haven't seen it.
Surprisingly so.
Well, look, I think that's a problem that I think conservatives think too much about that in general. The generation that grew up watching Leave It to Beaver, right, which is, I have to explain this for people, like, it was a very, very middle-of-the-road 1950s sitcom in black and white. I think the parents were sleeping in twin beds. Like, there was that clean. That generation that grew up watching that ended up rioting in the streets in the 60s. The generation that grew up in the 70s, early 70s, watching Norman Lear sitcoms, which were tumultuous and political and very left-wing, and had a very clear political agenda of left-wing politics. They grew up to vote for Reagan. So, it's like, All in the Family is a great example. If you're old like me and you remember that show was written by an incredibly outspoken liberal. It was created by all liberals. They're all liberals on the screen. And it was supposed to be this like shaking conservative Americans on CBS, watching CBS sitcoms and saying, there's a big world out there, and you guys need to, and they used as an emblematic character this character Archie Bunker, who was like conservative and racist, and he was a bigot, and he was like reactionary, and he was exactly like every old white dude in 1970 who like couldn't believe what had happened to his country. And the American people watched that show, and they instantly realized, oh, Archie Bunker's the hero. Because Archie Bunker was the only person on that show who had a job. His daughter had a job, too. He and his daughter worked. His daughter worked to support his, layabout son-in-law, who was a graduate student studying some nonsense. Archie Bunker worked 2 jobs. He worked on the docks, and he drove a cab. And Americans looked at that and said, well, I don't know. Yeah, he's kind of a pain in the neck, but the guy's like, he's paying for the house, he's paying for the food, he's paying for everything you're doing. Show him a little respect. And I think it drove Norman Lear crazy because they naturally loved the guy who was, earning.
So they somehow identified
Yeah.
with him and
normal.
and his family dramas.
Yeah, exactly. Like people watching TV, they want to relate to that character. They want to relate to somebody, and they're naturally going to relate to the guy. You know, they may not like it. They may not like they may not like everything he says. They may not agree with him politically, but they respect him as like a dude, as the head of the household, who's really, really working hard to put food on the table. And I think liberals had a hard time understanding that.
So you're going to be doing a presentation
Yeah.
at the Liberty Forum. And what kind of things will you be talking about? If you can get a little preview.
A little sneak preview. Well,
taste.
my concern right now is for the center right side that we are sort of lapsing into kind of this kind of self-narcotized sleep, where we're not paying attention, and where we prefer, and we've misunderstood one thing. We've misunderstood the success, the cultural or TV success of our heroes on TV. And we think that translates into political success. So there's a recent poll. Somebody asked self-described conservatives Republicans to name, the leaders of the Republican Party.
Okay.
And they named Trump, which I think was good because he's the president. But the other four were all celebrities. They're all people on Fox News.
Like talk show hosts.
Talk show hosts. And that is a real problem because talk show hosts, even the really popular ones, even the ones that everybody loves on Fox News, they only get like 4 million, 5 million viewers, if that. And that's not enough. That's nothing. I mean, Jill Stein got more votes. I mean, Ralph Nader got more votes. So we have confused show business and politics in a way that I think is really going to hurt the Republican Party in a major way in the future.
So what's the remedy to that? What do people need to be doing?
Well, this is what all Republicans and conservatives hate. Do what the Democrats do. They're smart. They really are. Stop rolling your eyes and sneering at them. I know all my Republican friends like to make jokes about Nancy Pelosi like she's a moron. Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House and then lost it, and she's the Speaker of the House again. That's hard. Everybody makes fun of like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Oh, she's great. Yeah, sure, I disagree with her. But, she put on a pair of sneakers and she went door to door in a machine district, in a machine city, in a machine state, and she unseated a very entrenched, powerful Democratic incumbent. That's pretty good. That's pretty smart. Barack Obama, everybody says, oh, Barack Obama, he was the community organizer in chief. Like, oh, that's a ridiculous thing. That was smart. He won 53% of the vote. He got so many votes in 2008 that even when he lost a whole bunch of votes in 2012, he still won. He's like Mark Zuckerberg. If Mark Zuckerberg tomorrow loses $10 billion, he's still plenty rich. Don't worry about him. Like, we act like these people are dumb because we disagree with them instead of doing what we should be doing, which is what every winning football team does, which is you run film of your opponent to figure out what they do. Like that's what the Patriots do before the Super Bowl, right? They sit and they don't watch themselves. They watch the other team to say, okay, well, we're going to be meeting that team on Sunday. They got there, so how do they get there? We don't do that. Instead, we would rather just sit there and watch Sean Hannity and applaud ourselves and say, oh, everything's fine. It's a mistake.
So one of the plays of the we'll say the left side, was to do ballot harvesting, right? So this is one where I hear lots of conservatives complaining, oh, this horrible practice, and it may be a horrible practice, but the Democrats or liberals are doing this, and the other side was complaining about it. And it looks like the conclusion would be, right, we need to do
right
as well as they do at it, or better.
Right.
Better if we're going to win, right?
If you want to win the presidency, not if you want to be a best-selling author or a very popular talk show host or make $1 zillion on Fox News, but if you want to win the presidency and want to win the country back, you're going to have to go door to door and knock on doors. You're going to have to engage with people who don't agree with you in neighborhoods where you don't think they're going to like you. You have to stop in front of every Subaru and say, can I just talk to you a little bit about capital gains? Whatever it is, right? You have to engage with people. We don't want to do that. We just want to engage with each other. So the big fights in the conservative movement are like, well, we don't like what Rachel Maddow said on MSNBC. Like, that matters. The actual scope of that issue is maybe 8 million people all in, like from the right and the left. And the middle is just sitting there waiting for somebody to pay attention to them. And trust me, in the middle, That's who's getting the knocks on the doors from the Democrats. That is why the Democrats won the Dallas suburbs. The Dallas suburbs in the midterms. That's why they won Orange County. Orange County. Because they are on the ground. We'd rather just sit there and tweet, obscenities at Rachel Maddow viewers and watch Tucker Carlson, who I like. He's a great guy. He's very funny, but, that's not going to move the needle.
Well, just changing topics slightly, who's your favorite public conservative these days?
Oh, God. That's a good question. I don't really know. I mean...
Or do you have one?
I'm so flinty and dark. I was this is already paint me in probably the wrong light, but I love Mitch Daniels, former governor of Indiana. Mitch Daniels,
choice.
He would go and he went on knocked on doors. He talked to people, and he let people talk to him, and he listened to them, and he pushed back when he disagreed. Very successful governor. Now he's president of Purdue, so he's a little happier in his life. But there aren't that many. We don't have as many politicians who are really willing to. I think really willing to engage with the people they need to engage with to actually get something done. And that, maybe Ben Sass. I like the senator from Nebraska, Ben Sass. He's a really smart guy, and he seems to be trying to figure out how to get the people that the Republican Party is losing, which is a lot of people, and how to get them back without changing the principles, but just trying to reach out to them and say, tell them a story about what he believes and why, and see if they have a story about what they believe and why that's compatible, which is the only thing we can do to persuade people.
Building those connections with people,
Yeah.
That's so important. Is there a last thought you'd like to leave us with as we wrap up today?
Oh my gosh, I
We've
mean,
got just a minute left.
I think my last thought would be this, is that you could also fall into the hole here and think, oh God, everything's terrible. Like, oh my God, the world is so awful. Like, conservatives do this too much. Like, everything, and liberals do it now too. It's just the worst time ever, when in fact it's the greatest time ever in all of human history. We've never been richer, healthier, happier. We've never had more opportunities. In this country, we've never had more opportunities for all people. It's never been a better time, and all we do is sit there and whine and bitch and moan.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure having you. We appreciate you on the show today. Just as we go, the IFES Hall, 432 Stearland Road, Mountain View, is where the Liberty Forum meets. And in April, Robert Sirico, founder of the Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty, is joining them. And in May, Mark Morano, who's a prominent global warming skeptic, founder and executive director of ClimateDepot.com, is the guest speaker. So please join them for more interesting views.